And I went back and strangled her again. That finally killed her at that time.
February 25th, 2005, Park City, Kansas, 7:15 a.m. Dennis Rader is driving his white Jeep Cherokee to work. He's 59 years old. He's a compliance officer for the city, the man who enforces regulations, who tells people to mow their lawns and follow the rules. He's also the president of his church council, a Boy Scout leader, a husband, a father, a grandfather. He stops at a red light. Suddenly, unmarked police cars surround him from every direction. Doors fly open. Officers emerge with guns drawn. "Step out of the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." Dennis obeys, calmly, no resistance, no panic. A detective approaches him. "Mr. Rader?" "Yes." "Are you BTK?" Dennis Rader smiles. "Yes, I'm BTK. The real BTK story." For 31 years, Dennis Rader murdered, tortured, and terrorized the city of Wichita, Kansas. He killed 10 people. He sent taunting letters to police and newspapers. He bound his victims with rope and watched them die slowly. And every night he went home to his wife and children, who had absolutely no idea. This is the story of BTK. This is the story of the man who lived next door. Dennis Lynn Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, a small industrial town in the southeast corner of the state, near the Oklahoma border. He was the oldest of 4 sons, born to William Elvin Rader and Dorothea May Cook. His father worked for the Kansas Gas and Electric Company. His mother was a homemaker. By all accounts, the Raders were a normal, unremarkable American family. But Dennis was not normal. As a child, he tortured animals. He hung dogs. He trapped cats and killed them slowly. He told classmates he enjoyed watching them suffer. He was obsessed with bondage. By age 11, he was stealing his mother's underwear and tying himself up in the barn, fantasizing about control, helplessness, and death. He called these urges his Factor X. Later, he would describe them as a demon inside him, something he couldn't control, something that demanded satisfaction. In 1963, Dennis graduated from Riverview High School in Wichita, where his family had moved when he was a teenager. He was quiet, unremarkable, forgettable. No one remembered him as particularly strange, just bland. In 1966, at age 21, Dennis joined the United States Air Force. He served 4 years, stationed in Texas, Alabama, Okinawa, Japan, and South Korea. He worked in administration, typing, filing, processing paperwork. Nothing exciting, nothing violent. He was honorably discharged in 1970, and that's when he met Paula. In 1971, Dennis Rader married Paula Dietz. She was 23 years old, a bookkeeper, quiet and religious. They met through mutual friends. She saw Dennis as stable, responsible, and respectable. On their wedding day, Dennis promised to love and protect her. He meant it, at least he thought he did. In 1972, their son Brian was born. In 1978, their daughter Carrie was born. By all outward appearances, Dennis Rader was living the American dream. He worked for ADT Security Services, installing home alarm systems, a job that gave him access to hundreds of homes across Wichita. He studied floor plans. He learned where people kept their valuables. He identified vulnerabilities. The irony was not lost on him. He was teaching people how to protect themselves from people like him. He attended Christ Lutheran Church every Sunday. He sang in the choir. He helped organize church events. In 1991, he was elected president of the church council, the most respected lay position in the congregation. He was a Cub Scout leader. He coached his son's baseball team. He helped his daughter with homework. Neighbors described him as helpful, polite, and boring. He was the guy who mowed his lawn every Saturday, one neighbor later said. The kind of guy you'd wave to and never think about again. Paula saw a devoted husband. The children saw a caring father. The church saw a model Christian. But inside Dennis Rader's mind, something was growing, something dark, something unstoppable. He called it his project. And in January 1974, the project began. January 15th, 1974. Wichita, Kansas. 803 North Edgemore Street. A quiet residential neighborhood on the east side of the city. Middle-class homes. Families with children. Safe. Predictable. The Otero family had just moved to Wichita from Puerto Rico 3 months earlier. Joseph Otero, 38 years old, worked for the U.S. Air Force at McConnell Air Force Base. Julie Otero, 33 years old, was a homemaker. They had 5 children: Charlie, 15, Danny, 14, Carmen, 13, Joseph II, 9, and Josephine, 11. The Oteros were building a new life in Kansas. Joseph worked hard. Julie kept the house. The children were adjusting to their new schools. They had no idea they had been chosen. Dennis Rader had been watching the house for weeks. He knew the family's schedule. He knew when the older children left for school. He knew when Joseph left for work. On the morning of January 15th, 3 of the children, Charlie, Danny, and Carmen, left for school as usual. 2 children stayed home. Joseph II had a cold. Josephine was helping her mother with chores. At approximately 8 a.m., Dennis Rader cut the phone line to the house. He put on gloves. He checked his kit: rope, cord, plastic bags, a knife, a gun. He knocked on the front door. Joseph Otero answered. Dennis pulled a gun and forced his way inside. He told the family he was a fugitive from California, that he needed food, money, and a car. He promised that if they cooperated, no one would be hurt. It was a lie. Dennis forced Joseph, Julie, and the 2 children into separate bedrooms. He tied them up with cord he had brought from home, cord he had pre-cut to specific lengths, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Then, one by one, he strangled them. Joseph Otero was killed first. Dennis placed a plastic bag over his head and tightened a rope around his neck. Joseph struggled. Dennis watched him die. Julie Otero was in the bedroom, tied to the bed. She could hear her husband fighting for air. She begged Dennis to spare her children. Dennis strangled her with his hands. 9-year-old Joseph II was in another bedroom, bound hand and foot. Dennis strangled him with a rope. The boy's small body went limp within minutes. 11-year-old Josephine was the last. Dennis took her to the basement. He told her she would be okay. He tied a rope around her neck, looped it over a pipe, and hanged her. Then he stood there and watched her die. And while she hung there, struggling, he masturbated. When it was over, Dennis Rader stood in the Otero house surrounded by 4 bodies. He felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, no horror at what he had done. He felt satisfied. He calmly collected his ropes and cords. He took Joseph Otero's watch and a small radio. Trophies. He wiped down surfaces. He opened the refrigerator and drank a glass of water. Then he walked out the front door, got into his car, and drove to his job at Coleman Company, where he assembled camping equipment. He worked a full shift. He made small talk with co-workers. He ate lunch in the break room. No one noticed anything unusual. At 3:30 p.m., Charlie, Danny, and Carmen Otero came home from school. They unlocked the front door and called for their mother. No answer. They walked through the house, room by room, and then they found them. Their father, their mother, their little brother, their little sister, all dead. Charlie called the police. Within minutes, the house was swarmed with officers, detectives, and crime scene investigators. They had never seen anything like it. 4 members of a family methodically murdered in their own home. No forced entry, no robbery, no apparent motive. The killer had left almost no evidence, except for one thing: a semen stain on the basement floor beneath Josephine Otero's body. April 4th, 1974. Less than 3 months after the Otero murders. 3217 East 13th Street, Wichita. Catherine Bright, 21 years old, lived alone. She worked as a secretary. She was independent, responsible, and well-liked. On the afternoon of April 4th, Catherine came home from work with her 19-year-old brother, Kevin Bright. Kevin had stopped by to help her move some furniture. They unlocked the apartment door and walked inside. Dennis Rader was waiting. He had broken in earlier that day. He had been hiding in a bedroom closet for hours. As Catherine and Kevin entered the apartment, Dennis emerged with a gun. "Don't move. Don't scream. I just need money and a car. If you cooperate, you won't get hurt." The same lie he had told the Oteros. Dennis forced Catherine and Kevin into separate rooms. He tied Kevin's hands with rope, but Kevin fought back. He lunged at Dennis, knocking the gun from his hand. The 2 men wrestled on the floor. Kevin managed to break free and ran for the door. Dennis grabbed the gun and fired twice, hitting Kevin in the face. Kevin collapsed, blood pouring from his head. but he wasn't dead. Dennis turned his attention to Catherine. He strangled her with his hands. She fought desperately, scratching his face, clawing at his arms. Dennis pulled out a knife and stabbed her repeatedly, 3 times in the abdomen. Catherine Bright died on the floor of her apartment. Dennis, bleeding from the scratches on his face and arms, panicked. Kevin Bright was still alive. He was a witness. Dennis ran out of the apartment, got into his car, and fled. Kevin Bright, despite being shot twice in the face, crawled to a neighbor's apartment and called for help. He survived. He gave police a description of the killer. White male, 30s, average build, dark hair, glasses. It was the first mistake Dennis Rader had ever made, and it would haunt the investigation for years. October 1974. The Wichita Eagle newspaper received a phone call. A man's voice, calm and controlled, told the operator, "There's a letter in a book in the Wichita Public Library. It's about the Otero case. You should go get it." Reporters found the letter hidden inside a mechanical engineering textbook. It was typed on a manual typewriter. The language was cold, detached, almost clinical. The letter described in graphic detail how Dennis Rader had murdered the Otero family. And it was signed, BTK, bind, torture, kill. Dennis Rader had given himself a name. He wanted credit for his work. He wanted recognition. He wanted the world to know what he was capable of. For nearly 3 years after Catherine Bright's murder, BTK went silent. No murders, no letters, no attacks. Police believed he had died, been imprisoned, or moved away. But Dennis was still there, still watching, still hunting, still planning. And in March 1977, he struck again. March 17, 1977. Shirley Vian, 25 years old, was home alone with her 3 young children. She was sick with the flu, lying in bed, too weak to move. Dennis Rader knocked on the door. He told Shirley he was a private detective working on a case. He needed to use her phone. She let him in. Dennis pulled a gun. He forced Shirley to lock her 3 children, ages 5, 6, and 8, in the bathroom. "Don't come out," she told them. "No matter what you hear." Dennis tied Shirley to her bed. He strangled her with a rope. The children, locked in the bathroom, listened to their mother die. When it was over, Dennis calmly untied the children and told them their mother was sleeping. He told them to stay in the bathroom for another 30 minutes. Then he left. The children waited. When they finally came out, they found their mother dead. December 8, 1977. Nancy Fox, 25 years old, lived alone in a small apartment on South Pershing Street. She worked at a jewelry store. Dennis broke into her apartment while she was at work. He hid in a closet and waited. When Nancy came home that night, Dennis emerged with a gun. He tied her hands. He removed her clothes. He strangled her slowly, watching her face as she died. Then he posed her body on the bed and took photographs. Before leaving, Dennis used Nancy's phone to call the police. "Yes, I just killed someone. 843 South Pershing. You'll find her there." He hung up. Police arrived and found Nancy Fox's body exactly as Dennis had described. And 2 days later, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle. December 10, 1977. The Wichita Eagle received a letter in the mail. It described Nancy Fox's murder in explicit detail, details only the killer could have known. And it was signed, BTK. Over the next several years, BTK sent multiple letters to newspapers and TV stations. He sent poems about his victims. He sent drawings of women tied up and tortured. He sent a chapter of a proposed book titled The BTK Story. In one letter, he listed his victims: Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, Joseph Otero II, Josephine Otero, Catherine Bright, Shirley V. and Nancy Fox. He described his urges as Factor X. He wrote, "I can't stop it. The monster inside me is too strong." Wichita was terrified. Women installed new locks. They bought guns. They refused to stay home alone. And BTK loved it. For 8 years after Nancy Fox, BTK went silent again. But in 1985, the killing resumed. April 27, 1985. Maureen Hedge, 53 years old, lived at 6254 Independence Street, Park City. Dennis Rader lived at 6220 Independence Street. They were neighbors, 7 houses apart on the same street. Dennis broke into Maureen's house while she slept. He strangled her in her bed. He carried her body to his car, drove to a remote location, and posed her body for photographs. Then he dumped her body in a ditch. It took 8 days for someone to find her. September 16, 1986. Vicki Vagerle, 28 years old, was home alone in the afternoon. Her husband Bill was at work. Her 2-year-old son was napping. Dennis knocked on the door, pretending to be a telephone repairman. Vicki let him in. Dennis pulled a gun. He tied her up. He strangled her. Her son woke up and wandered into the room. Dennis looked at the child. The boy looked back at him. Dennis left the child unharmed and walked out. When Bill Vagerle came home from work, he found his wife dead on the living room floor. January 19, 1991. Dolores Davis, 62 years old, lived alone in a small house on Hillside Street. Dennis broke into her home late at night. He strangled her. He took her body to a remote area under a bridge and posed it for photographs. Dolores Davis was BTK's 10th and final victim. And then, once again, Dennis Rader disappeared. After the murder of Dolores Davis in January 1991, BTK went completely silent. No murders, no letters, no contact. For 14 years. The BTK case officially went cold. Detectives retired. Files were archived. The public moved on. But Dennis Rader was still there. He lived in Park City with his wife Paula. He worked for the city as a compliance officer. He attended church every Sunday. In 2000, his daughter Carrie got married. Dennis walked her down the aisle. In 2003, he became a grandfather. He posted photos on the church bulletin board. He helped organize church dinners. He enforced city ordinances with bureaucratic precision. Neighbors described him as annoying, petty, and obsessed with rules, but harmless. Dennis Rader seemed like the most boring man in Kansas. Except he wasn't. In 2004, BTK came back. March 19, 2004. The Wichita Eagle received a letter. Inside was a photocopy of Vicki Vagerle's driver's license and 3 photos taken at the crime scene in 1986, photos only the killer could have possessed. The letter was signed, BTK. After 13 years of silence, he was back. Over the next 10 months, BTK sent 11 more communications to newspapers, TV stations, and police. He sent packages hidden in cereal boxes. He left items in public parks. He mailed a necklace he had stolen from one of his victims. He sent word puzzles listing the names and locations of his victims. He was obsessed with getting attention. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be famous. And that obsession would destroy him. In one of his communications, BTK asked police a question. "Can I communicate with you using a floppy disk? Can you trace a floppy disk?" The police responded through a classified ad in the Wichita Eagle. BTK: "Yes, we can communicate via floppy disk. It will be secure. We promise." It was a lie. On February 16, 2005, a purple floppy disk was found in a UPS drop box at a Home Depot in Wichita. The disk contained a single Microsoft Word document, a template for a church newsletter. Police analyzed the metadata embedded in the file. It revealed 2 critical pieces of information. Document author: Dennis, last saved location: Christ Lutheran Church. Detectives cross-referenced the church's membership directory. One name stood out: Dennis Rader, president of the church council. On February 25, 2005, at 7:15 a.m., police surrounded Dennis Rader's Jeep Cherokee as he drove to work. He was arrested without resistance. At the police station, detectives asked him directly, "Are you BTK?" Dennis Rader smiled. "Yes." On June 27, 2005, in a Sedgwick County courtroom, Dennis Rader stood before a judge and confessed. For 7 hours, he described each of his 10 murders in graphic, emotionless detail. He explained how he had stalked his victims, how he had broken into their homes, how he had tied them up, how he had strangled them. He described the exact types of rope he used, the knots he tied, the photographs he took. He spoke about his victims as if they were objects, projects, things. At one point, the prosecutor asked him, "Mr. Rader, when you strangled Josephine Otero in the basement, did you feel anything?" Dennis paused. Then he answered, "I felt satisfaction." The families of his victims sat in the courtroom, weeping. Dennis Rader didn't look at them. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, 1 for each victim. Under Kansas law, He would not be eligible for parole for 175 years. Dennis Rader showed no emotion as the sentence was read. On July 26, 2005, Paula Dietz filed for an emergency divorce. She told the court she had no idea. She had lived with Dennis Rader for 34 years. She had slept beside him. She had raised 2 children with him, and she never knew. The divorce was granted immediately. Epilogue, 64 year 65 Nawur. Dennis Rader is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. He is 79 years old. He spends his days in solitary confinement. In interviews from prison, he was asked if he had any regrets. He said, "I regret getting caught. I wish I had been smarter." He did not apologize to the families of his victims. This is the story of BTK, but it is also the story of 10 people who never came home.